Welcome, everybody. I have been super excited for a couple of weeks, ever since you said yes, you being Stephanie Stuckey. I'm looking at her over there. I'm about to introduce her. First, I wanted to thank everybody that's in the room and those of you who have joined online. You are in for a treat, and I am not going to talk about the topic or what she's going to say because I don't want to steal anything from this incredible, inspiring story that you are about to hear. There's a lot of angles in it that are going to be surprising, and you're going to go away better for hearing what Stephanie Stuckey has to say. I wanted to also welcome you. This is the Miller Zell, should probably get the company right. This is the Miller Zell speaker series where we bring in the best and brightest of retail to share thoughts for everyone in the industry. So this is, I think, the 4th or 5th installment. We've got a couple more coming in the fall where we're going to explore blurring the lines between how consumers get food from grocery, QSR, and C-stores. So that'll be very interesting, where we talk about how people are really considering all three of those when they're thinking what to get instead of it being so separate. We're also going to be taking a look at retail media networks as well, so stay tuned for those. But while you're here today, let's hear Stephanie Stuckey's story. So everybody give a warm welcome and listen to Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Chad. Thank you to the whole Miller Zell team. I'm so grateful for being here. And my talk today is going to be a little bit of a deviation. So if you've heard me talk before, this will not be my standard Stuckey's revival rebranding talk. I'm going to talk a lot about marketing. And I'm curious, I know there are some marketing folks in the room. How many folks are in marketing and branding? Yeah, so it's a good crowd. I feel like I can learn from you too. There will be an opportunity for Q&A and discussion afterwards, so be thinking about that. So I'm talking a lot also about storytelling, which is my favorite thing to do. I really don't think of myself as marketing as much as just storytelling, but that really is what marketing is all about, is telling your story. So this is one of my favorite quotes. This is from a person I love very much, my father. And we were talking earlier about the dynamic in family businesses. Anyone in a family business might appreciate this. I often do get asked, how do I make the dynamic of a family business work? Very simple for me. I bought out my father and I own the company outright. That's how that's how I manage the dynamic. But before I bought the family business out, my father would give me lots and lots of advice, and completely unsolicited. And so this was one of them early on. Quit wasting your time with those social media posts and go sell product. And I was posting stuff like this, right? And by the way, anyone know what this is? Any road trippers in the crowd? This is Route 66. This is the Catoosa Well in Catoosa, Oklahoma. It is an iconic image associated with Route 66, the Mother Road. So a key part of branding, and the folks who do this all the time know, is knowing what is your brand essence, right? And when I first bought the company, I got our team together, and I bought it 3 years ago, and we were 6 figures in debt at the time, and we're known for our pecan log rolls, right? Those of you who are familiar with the brand. And so we sat in a room and I said, well, we're going to figure out what is our brand essence. And we're not leaving the room until we decide. And it was a team of about 10 people. And if you've seen the movie or seen the play 12 Angry Men, it was like that. Like I was the one person who was like, not guilty. I was saying, I think our brand is about the road trip. And everyone else in the room was like, it's about the pecan. And my point was, I can only tell so many stories about the pecan. I mean, let's face it, it's a wonderful nut. It's the only snack nut native to America. That's kind of my storytelling on the pecan right there. So I'm like, I'm the one doing all the social media. Another question I get asked is, why do you do your social media? Why are you the brand ambassador for Stuckey's? Again, the answer is quite simple. I can afford myself. We are a scrappy comeback brand. But I kept saying, it's the road trip, it's the road trip, it's the road trip. So by the end, I convinced the others, we are about the road trip. And at first, they were skeptical, and I said, just give me a chance. Let me share stories about the road trip. And so that's what I do. If you follow me at all on LinkedIn, shameless plug if you don't, please do. But you'll see I very rarely am up there doing like, buy a pecan log roll, because that's kind of boring, right? I talk about road tripping. I talk about exploring America by car. I talk about the uniquely American experience of road tripping, right? And so many people can connect with that brand. So whether you road tripped in the 60s and pulled over at Stuckey's, and God bless you, we love you, but we know that you're getting older. We want to attract younger people. Younger people like to road trip. And so more and more they're connecting with our brand because we're sharing posts about the road trip. And it's working. Our sales have gone up because we're telling stories that connect with people on an emotional level. And people connect on an emotional level with a road trip a lot more than they connect with a pecan, with all due respect to my fellow pecan industry folks. So I'll give you a really good example of that. I kept telling my story, posting every single day on social media, coming up with stories. And after 2.5 years, I get a call from a freelance reporter who said, I'm going to pitch your story to the New York Times. So I literally spent 3 months talking to him because I wanted to make sure he really got the story right. And he pitched it, and it got on the front page of the business section of the New York Times. Yes. This summer, it was in July. I'm sorry, June 11th. I should know that by heart. So this shows you that storytelling works, because the article, and I can share it with Tina. I do hope you all subscribe to the New York Times, because I support journalism in America, something that's a dying art. But if you don't subscribe, I can share with you a PDF. He got it right, because the article is all about branding and the road trip, and a little bit about how we're reviving the brand financially, which is also very important, but it was a story of the road trip. And so this shows you, though, to prove my father wrong, that this works, because this was the first hour after the article appeared online. We sold 120 cases of pecan log rolls. That's a lot of pecan log rolls in 1 hour, and sales just soared. So that's just one example that if you're out there telling your story, it really does work. And has anyone seen a Savannah Bananas game? Yes, right? They are my heroes, and if you don't follow them on social media, please do, because they will tell you all about branding and marketing. The owner, Jesse Cole, bought the Savannah Bananas about 5 years ago. Just like me, he bought them in distress. His company was basically bankrupt. The facility was in terrible shape. He changed the name. He came up with the fun name, Savannah Bananas, and he made it all about experience and having a good time. And he's just out there telling stories, if you follow him. And they've gotten in the LA Times, the New York Times. They've been on the Today Show, all these shows, and they now have their own show on ESPN. And I remember when they got their own show on ESPN, so I'm a total fangirl, and I reached out to Jesse Cole, and I do know him. And I've gone to a game, and we sponsored a game for them, threw out pecan log rolls, so much fun during halftime. But I called him after he got his ESPN show. I'm like, Jesse, that's so great. How did you do it? Who's your marketing person? You know who his marketing person is? Him. Who's your publicist? Him. Right? Because he's being authentic and telling his story. So that's just a great example. So this was a great article, Travel and Leisure. I love they did this whole thing about how we're zero advertising budget. And then they called out my TikTok, which just cracks me up, because I'm not on TikTok that much. I don't dance or anything. But it does show like you need to put yourself out there and get outside your comfort zone. TikTok is definitely not my comfort zone. And some days I'll put stuff out there that's just whatever. But I never take stuff down if it doesn't do well. That's the other thing. I just put it all out there. If it's a mistake, it didn't work, it didn't work. So I'll try something else next time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our story for those of you who are not familiar with our brand, because I think it's important to put things in context, and also those of you with a multi-generational brand. How do you keep that nostalgia and that sense of history and respect for your past, but you don't live in the past. And that's something I've really struggled with. When I bought Stuckey's, I was an environmental attorney. I spent most of my time wearing Birkenstocks, hanging out in coffee shops, drinking oat milk lattes, and being a vegan and wanting to save the world from climate change. So I really didn't know anything at all about business. And I'm still learning. Every day I'm learning. But the way I've figured out how to revive this brand, and we are now profitable, thank God, it's because of this man. I bought a company in distress, but I got his papers. I got all of his archives, and none of them had been looked at for 50 years. So when I first bought the company, I spent every night reading my grandfather's papers, and I learned his story. And he became not just my grandfather, he became Stuckey. He became a businessman. And I only knew him as my grandfather. He sold the company before I was even born. So it was really fascinating to learn his story, and then from his story, I realized how I could revive his brand. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about that and the lessons I learned from him. So this was when we started, 1937, as a roadside pecan stand in Eastman, Georgia, my hometown. He had to drop out of the University of Georgia because it was the Great Depression, and he was farming cotton, which he hated. And he started selling pecans because it was a bumper crop year. Georgia's the #1 state for pecan production. And that little stand became Stuckey. So one day he decided he could increase sales if he came up with some candy. So he got my grandmother Ethel to make candy, and she and her sisters, Ethel, Bertha, Mabel, Hazel, right? These oldie-timey names. He interrupted their bridge game and said, "Hey, can you ladies make candy?" And they all went in the kitchen and made candy, and the Bridge Club became the Candy Club. So the first 3 years, all the candy was made by the Bridge Club ladies, which I love. And within 3 years, he was able to build the first Stuckey store. And at that time, by this time it was like 1940, right? Nobody traveled by plane, and when they traveled by car, there weren't places to pull over. So he was like an entrepreneur. He came up with a problem that people had, and he solved it. He found that people needed gas, they needed a clean restroom, they needed a cold drink, they needed a quick hot snack, and of course they needed some pecan log rolls and divinity, and then he started selling kitschy souvenirs. And he created the first roadside retail chain because he started adding more and more stores. So before there was TA or Love's or Buc-ee's, there was Stuckey's. He came up with that, and so it's pretty amazing what he did. And what I learned is that throughout his story, there were moments of incredible crisis where he almost went bankrupt, and he figured out how to turn things around. So that to me was what inspired me, that I could figure out how to save this company, because you have to hit rock bottom to get to that moment of inspiration. I truly believe that. Inspiration doesn't come when you're totally on the top and everything's working and you're high-fiving. It's when you're, frankly, desperate and need to try something new to survive. So he changed his business model. He had stores, he was doing really well with them, and then a crisis hit, World War II. And suddenly gas was rationed, so nobody was traveling. And even if they were traveling, sugar was rationed. All the ingredients for all of his candies, coconut, he made coconut patties, all that was rationed. So he had to shut down all of his stores, and he was threatened with going out of business. But what did he do? He reinvented himself, and he got a government contract to make candy for the troops. And he built a candy plant. And the great thing about this, the lesson I really learned, was that it wasn't just about him and his company, it was about the community, because the community was suffering then too. The economy these were tough economic times. So who did he employ during the war? He employed women. And he was building community. And when the war ended, it turns out those women really liked working, and they liked their independence. And so they all stayed on. Many of them spent their entire careers working for Stuckey's. So the first lesson I really learned from him was, first, don't be afraid to pivot when times are really, really hard, and reinvent yourself and change what you're doing. But he still kept his brand essence, because he was always about the pecan, and he was making pecan snacks for the troops. But he was not just making a profit. He wasn't just building his business. He was building community. And so I love that about his story. And then when the war ended, well, he was back in business. He built his stores back, and then he became vertically integrated. He got a trucking company, and he got a billboard company. I love these old billboards. They're art to me. Back in the day when billboards just weren't telling you where to go, but they were beautiful. I wish we still had that sign. I would give anything for that. And so we really became synonymous with the road trip. But he had another crisis. And you know what that was? It was the interstate highway system. When he built Stuckey's back, this was after the war, after World War II, this was before the interstate highway. Interstate highway came along in 1956. So he was putting his stores on Route 66, the Lincoln Highway, the Jefferson Highway, the Dixie Highway that ran through Georgia. And then the interstate highway came along, and all of his stores were bypassed. And he was threatened with going bankrupt. And what did he do? He pivoted, right? And so he uses an opportunity, y'all will appreciate this, in retail design. Before then, the store designs, they were really different. It was sort of opportunistic. He'd buy an old building and rehab it, or he would just build an A-frame. But he used the interstate as an opportunity to rebrand, and so he built this sort of curved roof with the lattice work, and he redid the logo. And I'm sorry, I should have had some good interior shots, but he redesigned the interior so that when you walked in, you literally had to go through a maze to get to the restroom, right? Because when you pull over, when you're traveling, you have to go to the bathroom, right? I'm amazed to this day. I'm sorry if y'all designed any convenience stores like this, but you walk in some of these convenience stores and there's a bathroom right there. What are they thinking? You want to walk through the entire store, through all the merchandise, and he made them walk right by the bathrooms, was what I call the wall of candy. It was just like you would just be bombarded with candy. And was it Tina who was telling me she saw the little vending machines right by the bathroom with the toys? Like all of that was just like overwhelming you. And he created that when he redid the stores. So he used what could have completely put him out of business as an opportunity to rebrand. And here's the other thing, he created an experience, which is what you try to do every day with your job in the retail world. And he took advantage of the fact that taking a road trip was suddenly a whole lot less interesting because you're not going through Main Street America. You're not pulling over at the Wigwam Village or the diners shaped like coffee pots. Those were all on Route 66. Those were gone. They weren't gone. Well, a lot of them are gone. You're on this miles and miles of asphalt. I talked to one guy who said he used to road trip as a kid through Kansas, and it was corn, Stuckeys, right? I mean, that's what road trips were like. They're this monotonous, and he realized this is a great opportunity. I can have this little oasis on the side of the road that can just be a jewel of fun. And he created a consistent design, but every store was unique and different in an experience that would reflect the local place where they came from. Because many people, they came from the north and they were going on vacation to Florida and they didn't know this weird place known as Georgia or Florida. Their only interaction with Hayhira, Georgia or Kissimmee, Florida would be pulling over at an exit at a Stuckey's maybe. So we would sell them oranges and alligator heads and coconut statues if they were in Florida. So they would know where they were and they had a sense of place. So he really used it as an advantage. Okay, so what happened to Stuckey's? Because we had a really bad downfall. My grandfather sold the company to Pet. You may know them for their evaporated milk. 1964, right a year before I was born. And then so Pet got bought out by another company, a Chicago railroad conglomerate, which definitely did not get a kitschy Southern roadside brand known for pecan log rolls and rubber alligators. So all of our real estate started being sold off and turned into porn shops. Broke my heart. And then there was the Arab oil embargo, and then there were changes in the airline laws, so airline became affordable. So nobody's road tripping anymore, and our brand plummeted. And we went from 368 stores in 40 states, having a candy plant, a trucking company, a billboard company, and a distribution center, to having none of that and about 100 stores. But everything was sold off. And then my dad got the company. He was running Dairy Queen stores on the Interstate Highway System, very successful brand. And he started pairing Stuckey's with Dairy Queen. That's how he kept Stuckey's alive. When he got Stuckey's back in 1985. And he kept Stuckey's alive with his Dairy Queen business. And then, so fast forward 30 years, he sells his Dairy Queen company to a business known as Berkshire Hathaway. Oh, that's mine. I'm really sorry about that. He sells, I can't blame anyone but myself. He sells the company, Dairy Queen, and go figure, Warren Buffett didn't want to buy Stuckey's. And so he left Stuckey's with a handful of people. And it was just a staff of less than 10 people. It was pretty much on autopilot for over a decade and 6 figures in debt. And that's when I had the completely unexpected opportunity to buy the company. So here's what I bought. People ask me, what did you buy? So at that point, when I bought the company, there were 13 stores left. And some of them don't look so great. And we also had 65 licensed locations owned by other people that are in pretty bad shape. We don't own any of the stores, by the way. And we had a rented warehouse in Eastman, Georgia, where we sourced product. All of our candies and our snacks were outsourced by third-party vendors, so we weren't making all the product that my grandfather once made was no longer made by us. And this is my favorite thing. So we had cases of these straw hats. I had 30,000 fidget spinners. I had 6 cases of Britney Spears t-shirts. And since we're a family brand, I cut this off, but it says Britney bitch, right? So, but thank God Britney Spears made a comeback. So I sold all those for a profit. And this was my first week on the job. I love this. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution said, heiress drives family legacy, Stuckey's on road to revival. I don't know about you. When I think heiress, I think Paris Hilton, right? I don't think someone who actually spent their own money. And I also think someone who got like a hotel chain was worth a lot of money. But having said that, I am an heiress because I inherited the name. And what I bought was what was not on the books. I bought the brand. I bought the memories generations of people had pulling over at our stores and having these wonderful experiences. And I also inherited, so one of the things I did was I revived our t-shirts from the 1970s, eat here and get gas. You gotta laugh at yourself, right? Yeah, by the way, I can offer those for sale later. So how we have revived the brand was, it's the pecan stupid I learned from my grandfather. We have to pivot, we have to reinvent the brand. I do not have millions and millions of dollars to buy stores and renovate stores. I wish I did. Anyone have that kind of money, talk to me afterwards. But we were able to get government financing for food processing and manufacturing in rural Georgia. So that's what I did. I got a business partner who's a 3rd-generation pecan farmer, and he had his own brand, and we bought a candy plant in Rennes, Georgia. And we're reviving the brand. Oh, I did want to show you. These are, and I can share this later, but every time I post about our story, I try to focus on core issues. So that's what I talk about. And then, of course, we stay true to the little pecan log roll that continues to be our bestseller. But the way we are growing the brand is not only talking about the road trip, but it's with the pecan snacks. And we have this audacious goal to be the go-to snack brand for pecans in this country. Because if you go to a snack aisle, what do you see? You see Planters peanuts, you see Blue Diamond and Emerald cashews and almonds, you see the pistachio, the wonderful company, right? You even see the macadamia nut, right? Manalawi. Where is the pecan? It's the only snack nut native to our country and is fighting for space in a mixed nut bag. It's just not even, like, where's the justice? And I love peanuts. I don't want to besmirch our, fellow pecan, our fellow farmers in Southwest Georgia who grow peanuts, but peanuts are a legume. They're an imposter on the nut aisle. And so that's really what we're trying to do. So I did want to talk briefly about really the most important thing to us, which is our purpose. And then I'm going to tell the Chick-fil-A story, because I promised I'd tell the Chick-fil-A story. And then I want to hear questions. But this to me is, if you only remember one thing I say, this is it. Throughout my grandfather's papers, I saw the same saying over and over: every traveler's a friend. And I asked my mom what that was about, and she said, well, your grandfather always said that, and he had it framed. It was over his desk, and he really believed anyone who came in contact with Stuckey's was a friend, whether you were a vendor, whether you were a customer, whether you were an employee. You were all treated with warmth and respect and hospitality. And nowhere was that more evident than during the era of segregation, because we were in the Deep South during the Jim Crow era, and our stores were never segregated. So if you see the movie The Green Book, this is a scene from The Green Book. I think it's the best scene in the movie. It's at a Stuckey's for that reason. And I wish I really looked everywhere in his papers for a lot of photos where we might show that we were racially segregated. And I realize there's not that many, because he did it very quietly, very subtly. He just did the right thing. And that sense of purpose, if you have that in the brand essence, you're going to survive anything. And so I'll tell you a very quick story. Fast forward 30 years, I was in the Georgia legislature for 14 years, and I got redistricted. I went from a 97% white district to a 73% black district through redistricting. And my opponent was the head of the local NAACP. And I thought, I'm going to get beat. But I decided I'm going to run. And I went to, as one does, if you are campaigning in Georgia in the Democratic primary, you go to the black churches to campaign. And so I went to the most powerful black church, Mount Patmos Baptist Church on Candler Road, Raleigh-Rucker, and I go to worship, and I'm sitting there, it's like a 3-hour service, and we're about 2 hours in, I'm sitting there on the front row, and Raleigh-Rucker says, I see Sister Stuckey's here today, and she's going to share some words. Okay, so I'm a Christian, but I love Jesus, but I'm not one to get up there and proselytize about my faith. And I'm going, oh my God, what am I going to say? And I look at the woman next to me and I said, what do I do? And she said, honey, just say praise Jesus a lot. So I go there like, praise Jesus. Everyone's praise Jesus. I'm so happy to be here today. Praise Jesus. And so I got through it, and afterwards I go meet with Reverend Rucker in his study. I was very nervous. I thought for sure, I had my game face on, he's going to say, I'm not going to endorse you, because he had a relationship with the head of the black head of the NAACP. And he said, Stephanie, I'm going to endorse you. I said, wow, I must have done a really good job today. And he said, oh no, honey, that is not it. Not it. He said, it's what your grandfather did. He said, my family and my congregation and people who look like me were always welcome in your stores. That is why I'm endorsing you. And that is purpose, right? Purpose lives on 30 years after his death in ways that he will never know. If you have a sense of purpose, your brand will survive almost going bankrupt 3 times. Because there's something greater than you. It's about community. It's about treating people with respect. And you do that, and the profit's going to take care of itself. By the way, I did win that election with over 70% of the vote. And it is thanks to this. It is this, right? So that's my favorite story. Okay, so this is how we're reviving the brand with our branding. And I'm going to flip through some of these. I'm going to tell the story, make others part of your journey. All right, I'm going to tell the Chick-fil-A story, and then I think I'll take questions. So about a year ago, I was asked to speak at Trillis Studios, which is owned by Dan Cathy, who's former CEO of Chick-fil-A. And I get there, I was told it was like 25 entrepreneurs and would be a pretty laid back Friday morning chill thing. And so I get there, And I walk in, and there's Dan Cathy. I did not know Dan Cathy was going to be there. And they said, oh, Dan Cathy wants to hear you talk. I'm like, great. And they said, also, he wants to introduce you. All right, so now I'm really nervous. I remember I ran to the bathroom, and I'm talking to myself in the mirror. And I'm going, you've got this. You have got this. And I hear the toilet flush, right? Like, that's what you do. So I walked out, and I get up there, and I started to talk, and my family had always had this story about Chick-fil-A, and I'd never heard if it was actually true. So I said, in front of this crowd, and in front of Dan Cathy, I'm going to tell the story, and it may be false. And if it's false, Mr. Cathy, tell me. But here's the story. My grandfather was at the peak of his career. Stuckey's was all over the country when Chick-fil-A was really getting started. And early in Chick-fil-A's history, they were trying to spread the brand by selling their chicken recipe to other establishments. And so Truett Cathy, the founder, and Dan Cathy, his son, came down to Eastman, Georgia, to pitch selling Chick-fil-A sandwiches to Stuckey's. And they put on their aprons, and they go in our test kitchen, and they made the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches for my grandfather. And they sat down with him. My grandfather took a bite, and he's like, delicious, this is great. I'll pass. We passed on Chick-fil-A. We passed on Chick-fil-A. Like, I don't even want to think where I would be today if that hadn't happened. So I tell that story, and I look out, and I said, Mr. Cathy, is that true? And he said, oh, yeah, that happened. I was down there. He said, that happened. I said, I am so sorry. And he said, oh, we did okay. So, all right, the last thing I was saying, then I want to hand it over for some questions and discussions, because I heard earlier y'all do a lot of work with Walmart to the point that you even have an office in Bentonville. So I'm going to tell a little Walmart story as well. And that's this. Okay, so one of the things I do is I stop at Stuckey's, obviously, when I'm road tripping. The 13 original stores that are still there, I stop. This one's in Baghdad, Florida. So I get to go to really exciting places like Cuba, Missouri, and Baghdad, Florida. And I pulled over at our store, and I posted this online, and a guy responded to, oh, wait, no, I know what, all right, back up. I got an email from a customer, and he said, I went to your store in Baghdad, Florida, and it was the tackiest thing I'd ever seen. You had merchandise hanging from the ceiling, and you had product just piled up everywhere, and it just looked awful. So a lot of times I'll get complaints about Stuckey's. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, the store does need some work. But that one made me mad, because I'm like, no, that's our brand. We are tacky. We do hang stuff from the ceilings, and we do pile our merchandise. And who else did that? Sam Walton did that. I've read Made in America 3 times. I love that book. And he talks about, pile it high, sell it low, right? And so not only did I respond to that guy personally, but then I was actually near Baghdad. I'm like, well, I'm stopping in Baghdad. I'm going to take a picture with the stuff hanging from the walls. And so I posted this, and I said, we are totally kitschy, and we are tacky, and that's our brand. And I love our brand. And, everybody should just be comfortable with you. We're not Neiman Marcus. We're not Buc-ee's. We're definitely not Buc-ee's. You get lost in Buc-ee's. You need a GPS to find the bathroom, and that's fine. That's great. That's not us. You don't need a GPS, but you might have to go through the wall of candy to find the bathroom for us. So I did this post and just talked about how much I love our kitschy tacky brand. So embrace your brand and be comfortable in your skin, and be a fangirl. So I'm not going to go through all these unless we need some more time, but I really would love to just hear from y'all and get some questions and get some feedback.
Great.
Yeah.
No, you go. I'm going to say
Yeah.
questions.
Oh, I will say, okay, I'm sorry, I should close with this, that it is working. All of the branding, all the talking about the road trip is working. In the past 3 years, our sales have gone from 2 million to 14 million. So it's working, yeah. And we just closed on a new market tax credit for $1.9 million to get new equipment. So we're in the process of expanding our factory, and we hope to close on a USDA loan for more money. And my business partners always get mad at me when I throw out money, so I'm sorry. But I'm excited that we're getting the revenue that we need, the financing that we need to really grow the brand. So when the USDA funds come in, we'll be able to really almost double our capacity of manufacturing. So, yes.
Question.
Thanks, Tina. Well, you did a wonderful presentation, first off.
Thank you.
And my question for you, since you stopped on that, the rejection, during your rebrand and your rebirth, how did you overcome rejection?
Yeah, we had a lot of rejection. So, yeah, by the way, that is my favorite quote, "Buy the ticket, take the ride," Hunter S. Thompson. One of the best books on road trips, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Anyway, I posted that. That's an homage, by the way, to Sarah Blakely with Spanx, because she always has the mug. I'm a huge fan of Spanx. Who doesn't love someone who made a fortune off of making women's butts look good? She's amazing, right? Amazing. Love that woman. So I posted that when I pitched to Tractor Supply. And everyone kept saying, "Why aren't you in Tractor Supply?" I'm like, I don't know. Why aren't we in Tractor Supply? So we pitched to Tractor Supply, and they turned us down. I was so bummed. They're carrying one of our competitors' pecan log rolls, and we are the home of the pecan log roll. And I'm not just saying this, we make the most delicious pecan log roll you'll find anywhere, because now that we've bought a candy plant, I personally oversee the production. You won't find a better nut. And so I was just crushed. And I actually reached out to the CEO of Tractor Supply on LinkedIn, and he did respond. And he said, "Well, you know, the other one, we have better profit margin." So that's why I'm investing in the equipment, so we can, for the pecan log roll, we can actually increase production 20-fold, and then we can bring the price down. So I'm gonna go back to him. So I'm not done. Tractor Supply, if you're watching, I am not done with you. We are coming back, and we're gonna meet your concerns, because we'll come back with more affordable. It's not gonna be cheap, it's gonna be more affordable, but it's quality. But the way I dealt with it was, one, I had a very well-timed hissy fit, so I think sometimes that's just called for in business. But I just thought, all right, it's not a no, it's a not now. And you figure out what was it that didn't work, and can we fix it? And then sometimes, rejection is just a way to point you in the other direction. Maybe we're not a good fit for Tractor Supply, but we really, really are a great fit for Tractor Supply. I mean, we're small town America. So we should be in Tractor Supply, and we will be in Tractor Supply. If I have to personally
Send it to them.
Pardon? What?
We're gonna edit this video, that part,
Right?
and send it to them.
Yes, yeah. But and then here's the other thing. I learned this when I was campaigning, when I was up for re-election, and I would knock on a door sometimes, and someone would say, well, I'm not voting for you because whatever. It was issue-based usually. And what I started doing was telling myself, instead of getting dejected, because there's nothing more depressing than getting rejected to your face, right? That's hard when you're standing on their porch. But I would make myself knock on 3 other doors. It would always get better. It would always get better. Never had the next 3 where they all turned me down. So you just, yeah, and you just keep going, because the next day it's gonna be better.
All right, we have another question from Ted.
It's interesting to me because we got engaged on social media with someone asking a question, what do we think about the Gap? What does that brand need to do to reclaim its marketplace share?
Right.
And you being in the generation that remembers the Gap thriving, I was going to respond, but I was like, oh, Steph Stuckey is going to be here. So what would you say to someone from the Gap who gave you a call and said, how do we revitalize our brand?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I'm really good at branding because I know my brand. I don't think I could be a good marketing person for any other brand. this is my brand.
I think you bring up a good point too. Maybe Gap doesn't know their brand anymore.
Yeah.
The essence of it is you talked about purpose.
I'm being authentic. Like this is me. So I think, yeah, Gap may need to just really get into what made them special, unique, and different to begin with, because right now there's so many other brands out there that are offering stuff. Oh, I'm so glad that wasn't me this time.
We have another question.
Yeah.
I'll take one from the people that are viewing. Why did you pass on Chick-fil-A?
It was my grandfather.
Yes, but why? They wanted to know why.
Oh, yeah, I did ask my father that, and he said, so I have, my grandfather died when I was 11, so I can't ask him, but my dad said that they really didn't want to be in the restaurant business. And I think that's really important to kind of know your space. You can't, unless you're Walmart, right? You can't be all things to all people unless you have this like huge budget. We don't. So we can't own and operate stores. I wish we could. People ask me that all the time. And I do say jokingly, but also seriously, if somebody comes to me with a ton of money and they want to do that, I'll license the brand and let them do it. But you have to know what your space is. So we are making the most delicious pecan snacks and candies you'll find anywhere, so we can be the go-to snack brand for pecans in America. That's what we're going to do. So my grandfather was like, we've got these roadside stores that sell product. He didn't want to have full-service restaurant. He didn't want to have a sit-down restaurant. The restaurant was a quick meal, and he wanted people to be walking through the stores buying product. And he made all his money with the retail. He didn't make his money with the restaurant. And my dad said they usually lost money. So I think that was it, but it was a misstep.
Yeah.
It was totally a misstep because people could grab a Chick-fil-A sandwich and walk through the store. But that wasn't his focus. His focus was, we make candy, we make snacks, and we sell a bunch of kitschy souvenirs, and that we want people buying in the store.
And what you're doing now really rolls into another question that was, talk a little bit about, you don't have Stuckey's restaurants. Like,
Yeah.
that's not your model. Your model is to find placements for it. So you're really creating partners to become your distribution channels. So the question was, I embellished on the front a little bit. The question was, how do you choose, which partners you want to approach, or how do you do that?
Good question. Right now, they're coming to us.
Nice.
Actually, every major account that we have has come to us via LinkedIn. And they'll reach out. Or I'll like Tractor Supply, I didn't get, but there are a handful that I'm like, oh my God, I love this brand. I would love to be affiliated with them. And so one of them is Wawa. Right? I mean, Wawa, such a great experience. So I pulled over to Wawa in Florida. Wawa's in Florida, but they're also Philadelphia. And one of the reasons I liked Wawa is they could help get us in new markets because we're mostly known as a Southern brand, but they have a presence in Florida where Stuckey's has a presence, but they also have this huge presence in Pennsylvania and sort of the Northeast. And I thought there's enough of a connection with the South that we could get into them. And then they could, if we do well, then maybe they'll help us get into Pennsylvania and get into more markets so we can be the go-to brand for pecans everywhere. So I kind of stalked Wawa, and I went to Wawa in Florida, and I took a photo of me with a cup of Wawa coffee, which is delicious, and I held up a pecan log roll, and I'm like, this is the best road trip breakfast. And I said, but what's missing about Wawa is they don't have Stuckey's. And I said, if you think Stuckey should be in Wawa, please share and tag the CEO of Wawa. So within 4 hours, I get an email from the CEO of Wawa, and he's like, I've gotten 50 messages today that we need to bring your product in. And he said, and I had a Zoom meeting with him. I had a 20-minute Zoom meeting, and then he connected us with his buyer. It took 6 months to actually get in their store, right? We had to get in their distributor, we had to pay slotting fees, we had to get in the planogram, blah, 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 but we're now in Wawa in Florida. Yeah. So Yeah, all through social media. So there are some strategic where I just think my goal is to be the go-to snack brand for pecans in this country. So what are the ways I can do that? And we are known as a road trip brand, so the best entry point for us is convenience stores. That's the best entry point, and we're slowly getting into grocery. Slowly. The one I love is H-E-B. Anyone from Texas? Yeah. So I like brands that have a cult following. Right? That's what you want. Brands that have a sense of place. Brands that know who they are. Not like Gap doesn't know who they are anymore. Wawa has a sense of who they are. People are just like crazy about Wawa.
People are buying culture now. Even
Yeah.
they're buying a culture of a brand, yes.
I mean, when we got in the H-E-B mother store in San Antonio, and I'm hoping we'll expand more, but I mean, I get messages from people who are like, oh my God, when is Stuckey's going to be in my H-E-B? And they feel, Piggly Wiggly's another one. People just like, they just go crazy for the pig.
I love too, if you think about it, you're crowdsourcing your sales force, and I love that.
Oh yes, 100%. And I'm working with a small female-owned company that has an app that will help me sort of connect some of the Stuckey's fans out there with us digitally so they can start sharing photos on the road, do word-of-mouth marketing, really share our brand. Is my time up? I see whispering.
No, your time
Okay.
is not up. What about Quick Trip? Question? Anybody?
Quick Trip's a good one. Yeah.
Say that so the people that
Quick Trip.
say it out loud.
What about Quick Trip?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great brand. That's a family-owned brand. They're based in the Midwest, Oklahoma, right? Yeah. So that would be a really good brand for us. Right now, our biggest challenge in getting into some of these large chains, although that's a good chain because it's not too big. It's not like, well, it's like 7-Eleven. We couldn't manage 7-Eleven. We couldn't manage Walmart right now. We couldn't manage the volume. So as soon as we get the financing and start scaling, Quick Trip is on our list. And pardon?
When I go to Quick Trip and get one, I'll take a picture.
Yes. Yeah, and Racetrack, because that's a Georgia brand. Yeah, so we're talking to Racetrack. Not in there yet, but we're putting that together.
And speaking of, we have a good question online. Is there any part of your long-term plan that involves licensing or franchising Stuckey's road stops?
Yeah. So any lawyers here? I'm a lawyer. I don't want to get too wonky on this. The reason we don't franchise is when I bought the company, we were franchising, but we had not been in compliance with franchise laws for over a decade, and we were facing serious fines for not being in compliance with our disclosure requirements. And the only way legally out of it was to not be a franchise and to say, well, yes, we didn't comply, but we're not a franchise, we're a license. So we had to renegotiate all our contracts with licenses. That's great, we're now in legal compliance. The bad side of being a license is you don't have as much control as a franchise, but we don't have the infrastructure for a franchise. We don't have the sales, we don't have the ops team, we don't have a franchise manual, we don't have the training, we don't have any of the structure you need. So what we have are 68 locations that pay a modest fee to use our name. And I really am not interested in growing a lot of that because I don't want to get distracted by, squirrel, there's a franchise. We want to be the go-to snack brand for pecans in this country. And I can't do that if I'm busy licensing, right?
I love hearing the focus. And
Yeah.
It's great.
But again, if somebody comes along and wants to be in charge of licensing for us and pay us to use our name,
Right.
I'll talk. Yeah, that'll work.
Hey, Stephanie. So when we spoke earlier, we talked a lot about engagement from your posts. So if we go back to the marketing side of this, you don't just post things and a couple people like them. There's engagement
Yes.
from your posts. So just talk a little bit about how you think being authentic and true to yourself and your brand has played into that engagement.
Yes, so it's all about a conversation. And that's why I much prefer talking to people than getting up here and just talking to you. I want to engage. So when you share a story, don't just share a story to be sharing a story. Share a story that's going to prompt dialogue. It's going to get people responding. And I try not to do it in a shameless way, like, let me know in the comments what you think, but sometimes I will do that. But you really want to prompt that. And then when they do respond, then you want to respond to them, provided they're not weirdo stalker types. But for the most part, they're not. They're very sincere. And so that's what it's all about.
In following you, which you should if you don't, very entertaining. It's led to things like exactly what she said, where people are posting pictures with your product.
Yes.
The word of mouth marketing, and how many people out there actually feel like they can email a CEO and she's going to respond, right? So I think there's something to be said for that's who your brand is, and you're really living that every day. I think it's great.
Yeah, that's what's worked for us. That's our brand. It's not every brand. Not every brand's going to have a CEO who's going to be out there doing that, which is fine. That we're able to do that because that's what we have to do to, frankly, promote the brand. But it's working for us, so it's authentic. It's working.
So not only are you crowdsourcing your sales force, your fans are your marketing department.
100%.
Your marketing department. That's
I
brilliant.
mean, the most effective type of marketing is word of mouth marketing.
Right.
Right? Like, we were talking, wait, who was I talking to earlier? Yes, you. We talked about how you came here because you heard about it from someone else on a Facebook post, right? Someone you knew, someone you interacted with. It was a connection. It wasn't just an ad that was paid for, that was promoted. It was a personal connection. And that's the most effective way to sell something, to promote a message. I mean, I learned that in politics too. It's that one-on-one. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the branding. So you said that you are basically you're saying you're the branding of the company. How do you, or have you thought about how that will play out, or how that's going to evolve as the company grows, or stay around a little bit longer?
I would love to be able to afford a CMO, a chief marketing officer, but realistically, I mean, my team has kind of said internally, Stephanie, when we hit 50 million in sales, then you can have a CMO. I'm like, great, thanks. But I mean, the point is, all the money we're making, we're investing in scaling production to become the go-to snack brand for pecans in the country. So we've got to scale production. And there's nothing more important right now. And so I'm going to continue to be the marketing officer and the face of the brand. And I think I'll always be the face of the brand, but at some point I'll get support. Although I've got 2 nephews who are interested in working with the business, and their last name is Stuckey, and they could totally be the face of the brand. So I'd love to hand that off at some point. Maybe when I'm 90, I don't want to be the face of the brand anymore. So.
Got a little bit different question here. So when this opportunity came up, I mean, this is a big change for you.
Yeah.
And it must have been, scary and overwhelming. And so you thought about it. How close were you in determining how difficult it was going to be? And what were the big surprises? I mean, because this is a big deal.
Yeah, good question. I was incredibly naive. And that was why I did it. I think your vulnerability is your superpower, right? You have to own that. And had I known all I was getting into, I don't know if I would have made a different decision. I can't second guess what I did, but I just didn't have any concept because I'd never even balanced a budget. I mean, my budget experience was being in the Georgia legislature. So fighting over pork projects isn't exactly great training for how to run a company as a CEO. And even to make matters worse, initially, my grandfather had 7 grandchildren. I'm number 5 of 7. And I went to all the others and asked them to do it with me. I didn't want to do it alone. And not only did they all say no, but I learned that this investment group that included my father, that owned the company at that time, they had gone to every other grandchild before me, including the 2 younger than me. And they'd all said no. So I was the end of the line. And so I think at that point I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. Like I'm going to show you. I think having a bit of a chip on your shoulder sometimes is a really good thing. Like, okay, you don't think I can do this? Okay, all right. I'm gonna do it. But really, what motivated me more than anything, and you can understand this as a family brand, is I loved my grandfather. And his company had been reduced. When I say our stores had become strip clubs, I mean it. There's the Foxy Lady in Arkansas. There's the Fox's Den in Oklahoma. It's like Fox seems to be a really good title for former Stuckey stores. And I mean, how would you feel if your grandfather's company, you're driving down the interstate and people are like, oh, that used to be a Stuckey's and now it's a strip club? Like, some people may like that. I didn't like that. And I didn't want that to be our legacy. I didn't want us to be this Google search that the top hit on Google when I bought Stuckey's was, whatever happened to Stuckey's, followed by, did Stuckey's ever go bankrupt? And how often does a family get the chance to buy their company back and revive it? Like that just doesn't happen. And so it was like my grandfather did. He wasn't building a company, he was building community. It's got to be bigger than you. And I thought, I want to show other people out there who have family businesses, and maybe they've lost their family business, that they can revive it. Like, you can do this. You have to reinvent it. You can't do what you've been doing because what you've been doing is not working. What Gap's been doing is not working. So Gap needs to totally hit the reset button. Or maybe they just need to close the door. I don't know. But you have to reinvent yourself.
So Stephanie, I know we're coming out of time, but I've got another question from online, and they're asking, where are you on a more healthy version of the pecan products?
We're there. We already produce it. Go on Stuckeys.com. We have pecan pieces. We have pecan halves that are raw. Pecans are the healthiest nut. They're the highest level of antioxidants. They're also the most sustainable nut. I don't want to bash the almond, but it is a thirsty bastard in a drought-prone region. Just saying that, no. But we're a sustainable nut. We're a healthy nut. The word has not gotten out there because the other nut industries are super well organized. Most of them are owned by large conglomerates, and they have leveraged through a federal marketing order a lot of money from the USDA. The pecan, on the other hand, is grown in 18 states, and the pecan farmers all fight amongst themselves, and they fight with the shellers, and they are just now getting organized and cohesive. But that really is why you don't see pecans on the aisles as much. Also, it tends to be a higher price nut because the crops fluctuate. So the message is not getting out as much as it should that it's a healthy nut, but it is the healthiest nut. So we sell the raw nuts. We also sell roasted and salted pecans, and we are coming out as soon as we get the new equipment and can scale. We're going to come out with teriyaki, wasabi, lime, and some other flavors that will be savory and will be healthy. And I hope our future includes pecan oil, pecan milk, pecan butter. You know, sky's the limit. Why should we have oat milk and almond milk as our only choices? Those are great, but let's have some pecan milk.
You good for a couple more?
Mm-hmm.
A couple more. Did you have a question?
Yes, but you kind of answered it already. You talked about the art of storytelling, and we know how important storytelling is. As we all leave here today, what do you want us to leave with the story of Stuckey's? What do you want us to take back to our friends and our families as we talk about Stuckey?
Every traveler is a friend, right? Have a sense of purpose. Have a calling that is higher than you, and have that story that's really innate to your very being. And you know, our story is like we are this welcoming oasis where everyone is treated with respect. And even though we're now reviving the brand as a snack nut, that doesn't mean that everyone who comes in contact with our brand shouldn't be treated as a friend. And talking about the road trip is the same way. Maybe we're selling the pecan log rolls on the snack nut aisles, and we don't have as many stores, but I still want people thinking about our product when they think about the road trip. Or when they think about the road trip, they think about Stuckey's. Like, it's not a road trip unless you take Stuckey's along. So it's like Corona, the beer. right? What are they? It's all about being on the beach, right? Or I might be aging myself, but anyone remember the Calgon commercials where, like, take me away, and they're taking a bath, but they're like in some, exotic place. They're selling bath salts, right? But you want this sense, this feeling of you're going away to this luxurious, amazing tropical place, or you're drinking a Corona. You may be in your basement in landlocked Ohio, watching videos, but you get the sense of being at the beach. So I want our brand to be associated with fun, road trips, that uniquely American experience of exploring America by car. And for storytelling, I'll tell you one thing. I got some really good advice in a book I read, Fizz Marketing by Ted Wright. And he said every story you tell should have 3 components. And he uses an acronym, so I love that. AIR. It should be authentic, it should be interesting, it should be relevant. So every time you're thinking of sharing a story, is it authentic? Which means you don't have to tell every single detail, because that's boring. It has to be real, but just make it interesting, and then make it relevant. It's got to relate to people. So you can't just talk about buy our pecan log roll. You got to talk about something that people will find interesting and relate to.
Stephanie, thanks for sharing your story, your passion today about the business. I do have a question. 3 years into your venture, what does your family think, and what does your dad think about what you've done and what you've been doing and what you've accomplished so far?
Yeah, Dad is great. He's super proud of me. One thing, I tell the story sometimes. When I first bought the company and I went to seek his blessing, I was buying the company and I was asking for his advice and seek his blessing. And I said, what do you think? Should I do this? And he said, well, you've never even run a lemonade stand. What makes you think you can run Stuckey's? To which I did not have a good response, because he was right. Did not have any business experience. I remember walking out from that meeting going, oh yeah, well, I just think I can. And then I walked off and I tripped. It was such a bad moment. It was such a low moment. But the first month we made a profit, I remember our balance statement and our income statement, it was $12,000. I was like, yes, right? Now, $12,000 may not be much, but when you've been 6 figures in debt, I'll take a profit. I'll take $12,000. So I sent him the financial report. I emailed that to him. And then in the body of the email, I said, maybe I can't run a lemonade stand, but I can run Stuckey's. And he's like, okay, congratulations. By the way, it's only $12,000. So he's right. But he's super supportive. But what you want is somebody supportive, but will also keep you in check. And he will. And he does think he thinks the social media stuff is crazy, until I did a TikTok video with him, and it got more engagement than any other TikTok I'd done. And he was like, oh my gosh, my friends are all saying they see me on TikTok. So it's funny. I made him tell the story of how my grandmother made her pecan log rolls, and he was sitting in his lazy boy recliner. I made him cut off Fox News for 2 minutes to do the tape, and he loved it, and he had fun. So he's really supportive. I value his judgment, and he knows the brand better than me, really.
Well, this question from online rolls right into what you're talking about, and it's a very simple one. Do you recommend leadership take an active role in social media? And if so, how?
Only if they want to. I don't think anyone should. I think I'm a big believer in getting outside your comfort zone, because that's where you grow. But at the same time, if that is not your skill set and that's really not your passion, then no, you shouldn't. And we were talking about this earlier. It's not like I wake up going, oh gosh, I want to speak in public. I think I'm like everyone, but I don't relish it, but it's part of what needs to happen to grow the brand. And within reason, within the confines of the law, there's very little I won't do to grow Stuckey's. So I think it's important, leadership be willing to do what it's going to take to grow the brand. But if they really don't want to be on social media, then it's not going to help the brand to have them not be into it. But I follow a lot of CEOs on social media. The CEO of Impossible Burger is wonderful, and CEO of Ulta Beauty, CEO of See's Candy, Pat Egan, we're friends now. So some of them are really out there, and you don't have to be the most The great thing about being the face of your brand, if you're CEO, it's not like you have to be a supermodel. You know, you just be yourself. That was one thing my dad said. He's like, well, why don't you get like a social media influencer who's like 20? And I'm like, what are you, Don Lemon? And I was like, Dad, well, one, I can't afford them, but two, it's authentic. They don't know the brand. So nobody's going to be as authentic as the leaders, I think. But I also think leaders should be, like whenever I'm at our candy plant, which is at least once a week, I do a shift with the work crew on the front lines. I think every leader should be on the front lines doing their work.
Agree with you, and ours does,
Yeah.
which is very, very cool.
Yay.
Yes.
Yeah, and like people ask me, you should be on Undercover Boss. I'm like, well, they would all know who I am. It would never work. They all know me, you know?
Right. And I think, well, I know we've been watching the trend lines for what consumers are looking for, and they're looking for that transparency for leadership, and they really are demanding it. So it's good that you're doing that. Another question. And if you think about shop-in-shops is very big.
Yeah.
What you did in kudzu is sort of a shop-in-shop.
Yeah.
And the question is, have you, ever considered a small 1,000-foot square foot pecan-centric shop in a large center or outlet along the highway? So a shop-in-shop kind of thing. I think that's what you're
Sure.
doing.
Yeah, I just don't have the capital for it.
Right.
I have designed a display that's beautiful, and then the price of steel went up, and so I'm trying to renegotiate and figure if I can make it again. But it was a big display that looked just like a little pecan. I mean, it looked like the old Stuckey store with the roof, and it had shelves, and people love it. And it is like a little store within a store. And I've also thought about doing that model like a kiosk, like at an outlet mall. Again, I just need the capital.
Right.
I don't have the capital for it.
Just crowdsource it. Just put it on LinkedIn. Well,
I've thought of, yeah, I've looked into that. Crowdsourcing, it takes a lot of work. You have to
It
build a
does.
whole campaign. You have to have video collateral. I don't have the funds for a video crew to do a crowdsource video. I don't. I mean, unless I can do it on my cell phone, but I've seen what they do on those crowdsource videos,
Yeah,
and
it's
it looks
amazing.
it's very, very professional.
it is. Any other questions in the room? Yes. Of course, it's across the room.
This is actually another question from online, and the question is, I know you talked about Wawa, but do you have any other product distribution in the Northeast or other C-stores that you're looking to break into?
Good question. Well, a lot of the ones we're looking at, like Racetrack, are national brands. I think right now I'm focusing, this is just drawing on my days in politics, what do you do first when you're running a campaign, if it's political or if it's business? You shore up your base, and our base is the South and the Midwest. So initially, and there's so many stores in the South and the Midwest, so let's try to really saturate that market and then build the word of mouth so it happens organically to get more in the Northeast. But brands like Wawa make perfect sense for us because they do have a Southern presence. And by the way, Wawa is coming to Georgia. I cannot wait. They should have a store very soon. But like Casey's is one that we got in seasonally for pecan log rolls during the Christmas time, and so I'm hoping we can expand that. So right now I'm looking at Texas brands, Midwest brand. I love Texas, love the state of Texas. It's just such a great market for us. Southern, and then we'll go from there.
As a Philly girl, that's exciting to hear about Wawa.
Yes, yeah. But Sheetz is another one. Like I'm looking for, again, brands that just have a really strong sense of identity and that align with what we are. Yep.
Any other questions? She's right there. Nobody.
Well, I'm going to stick around a little bit
Okay.
and
Okay.
chat with folks who are here.
So, just making sure. Thank you all for coming. I love to see the faces for these speaker series. It's always a really good conversation, and you always, from what I hear, you always leave with lots of things to think about. We always have continued conversation. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Miller Zell appreciates it, and look forward
thank
to
you.
Sending you invites for our future speaker series sometime late summer and sometime fall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.